Lamprey, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you want to bring up some of the points you had?
Antonio, Brooklyn Monk's brother. He's an engineer for Raytheon. He's one of the top engineers. He designs satellites. Happened to have lunch with him 2 or 3 days after our last live stream. I wanted to ask if I go, can you please help me debunk the concept of flat Earth? Well, for me personally, to debunk flat Earth, I had to ask someone who designed satellites to come up with some plausible questions in regards to the concept of flat Earth. Here's what he had to say. All other planets are spheres. They are spheres because when molten rock cools, it cools in a sphere. If all other planets are spheres, why would you think Earth is any different? Mars is round, Venus is round, Uranus is round, everything else is round. Why would the Earth be flat if the rest of the satellites are round?
Chris, you got a response to that?
Yeah, it's incredibly easy. Yeah, it's fallacious logic for the very simple fact that it's an appeal to similarity. You're basically saying, well, Mars and Venus and Jupiter and Pluto, everything else is a sphere. The moon is a sphere. So why wouldn't the Earth be a sphere too? It's an appeal to similarity, but the Earth is admittedly, by mainstream science's own admission, the Earth is the one exception in the known universe. It's the only one to harbor consciousness and life. When the Earth is admittedly absolutely nothing like the barren, desert, lifeless planets they say surround us, it's fallacious logic, and it's an elementary argument that people who are uninitiated to this topic make, and I don't mean that offensively, but...
So you're saying because Earth harbors life, therefore it obviously is different, and going by the other satellites that don't have life, we're different basically, so we have to be flat.
No, that's a silly simplification. All I'm saying is that the reasoning, the logic being deployed in the argument your friend makes, that reasoning is an appeal to similarity, saying the Earth must be like everything else, but Earth is admittedly like nothing else. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's a bit of a flaw in the logic of that argument.
Yeah.
All right.
Right. Now, what's some more of the questions that your friend had, Lamprey?
Why does your friend, meaning Red Pill Philosophy, why do you think science is monolithic?
Yeah, monolithic. If I recall from the response that I put in the comments to your posting of your satellite friend's questions, I think I was saying it was monolithic in the context of the first debate we were having, and
well, he's asking the question is that it's not an echo chamber with science. There's plenty of other people that can disprove the concept of flat Earth. So why do you think that there's a consensus altogether stating that it's a globe, and the people that are flat earthers are just crazy conspiracy theorists, yada yada yada, when you can have an independent scientist verify the Earth being round? That's what he meant by it, saying, why do you think it's monolithic? No shit, science is not monolithic, but the intellectual bandwagons who blindly believe and defend whatever the current consensus happens to be is monolithic.
Okay. All right. Yeah. That's it. It's not that the scientific method is monolithic. It's the people who align themselves with consensus, because consensus is not science. So just because most scientists think we live on a sphere, that doesn't mean shit. It's not that science and the scientific method is monolithic. It's that there's people who worship consensus and like to call themselves scientists or fans of science, and all they do is defend the intellectual status quo, whatever happens to be the consensus at this moment.
That's the fallacy of the appeal to authority, and it happens a lot. And the example of global warming is a great one, because you're right. In social media and in the media circles, their argument is this is their scientific argument for global warming being real. 90% believe, therefore you should too. I mean, that is the exact opposite of the scientific method, and they call it science. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
But there's an authority that comes with wearing a lab coat. There's an authority with flaunting what your credentials are. There's an authority, and I think it almost like casts a spell on people who don't know enough to know if you're even right or wrong. So the uninitiated will just listen to the dude who sounds smart and confident, and people are like, well, he really sounds like he knows what he's talking about, so there's no way he's wrong, right? So I think that does have an effect on what people are willing to believe.
Absolutely. And before, Lamprey, I want to get into your next question, but before we do, I want to add on to what Chris has just said. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is the perfect figurehead for what we're talking about here. I mean, everybody looks up to this guy as like, whatever he says, that must be true. Back when I first started looking into it, one of the greatest arguments by globe followers and believers was also anecdotal. And what they would say is, oh, I've been in a plane and I've seen the curve, so therefore it's round. I used to hear that all the time 2 years ago. But isn't it funny, Chris, how things have changed? Because now,
Oh, yeah.
Neil deGrasse has gone on the record in the media and said, you cannot see the curve from 35,000 feet in the plane. You cannot see the curve. And he used the Felix Baumgart jump, the Red Bull jump, as an example. And he said, that curve is from the camera. You cannot see a curve from 128,000 feet. That stuff is flat.
Yep.
And that argument wasn't being tossed around by the intellectuals 2-3 years ago. That, to me, is damage control.
I agree. I think that's what they were doing. I think as people more and more started to question what the hell we live on, whether or not this ancient presuppositional consensus was true, and then once people started really thinking, they're like, wait a minute, can I actually see the curve out my window? Even though like it was a mass hallucination for decades. Like how many human beings have lived and died since the advent of airplanes, who have flown around the world, looked out their window? How many have lived and died, have gone to their graves thinking they saw the Earth's curvature from an airplane window? I mean, the number must be in the tens of millions or more of people who are like, oh, yeah, I saw it on my airplane. Ooh, I saw the curvature. Like now the authorities are saying, no, sorry, that was a mass hallucination that took place for decades. Like people like to call flat earthers insane, but we're not the ones hallucinating curvature, dude, by the mass millions.
That is damage control. 100% damage control. There are hundreds of videos that you can look of high altitude balloon footage, amateur high altitude balloon footage, where you don't see a curve, man. At 100,000+ feet, you just don't see it. It's not there. Using a regular camera, not a fisheye lens.
Yep.
So eventually, the powers that be, they had to do damage control.
Oh, it turns out that, the ancient Greek experiment by Eratosthenes, it turns out that wasn't conclusive proof we live on a globe either. Turns out he only had 2 wells when, back in ancient Greek times when he did the experiment. And he literally, Neil deGrasse Tyson is on video saying this. He says, oh, he only had 2 wells. So technically his experiment would work on a flat Earth and it would also work on a globe Earth. Then he had the damage control and say, oh, but if he had 3 wells though, then the 3 wells could only work on a globe and not the flat Earth. So this guy's experiment for 2,000 some years stood as proof of the curvature, and now they're saying, oops, he didn't have enough wells. It actually doesn't prove anything either way. It could be flat, could be a globe.
Yes.
I mean, even with all the devastating concessions, flat Earth is still ridiculed as the dumbest thing you could ever be. And that's how they win, because you can't get people to even ask the question.
I'm open to anything, but I'm not really that open to the concept of flat Earth. That's
absolutely. Yeah, and that's great. This is why we're here. We want to discuss this. We want to toss out ideas, man. I myself, slowly over the last couple years, just looked into it. It happened when I was still in Bali. I was my last year in Indonesia. I was still in Bali. And a friend of mine came to visit. He just brought it up. He said, hey, man, have you looked into flat Earth? And I said, no, I have not. But I will. And honestly, it didn't upset me. Like, I didn't get angry. I just didn't get angry. I just thought, oh, that's fascinating. You know what? I'm going to do that. And now I'm here. What about you, Chris? Explain a little bit maybe to the listeners now. And
YouTube, actually, which is ironic because now they've decided to go 1984 and censor the shit out of Flat Earth. So this was before the elite realized how dangerous it is to let the mere peasants, have freedom of information and freedom of communication. Great. It was like the wild, wild west of video creation content. First video I actually saw was pretty sure it was one by Math Powerland. He was like contracted by NASA to paint pictures of planets and space, Photoshop the pictures of space, basically going over, everything NASA says is fake, and if they actually got up high enough to see what the hell they lived on, and it turns out it was flat and they had it wrong, would NASA come back down from the moon and say, oh shit guys, we were wrong for 2,000 years, it's actually flat, the way it looks, the way that's all you ever see, no matter how high you can freaking get, flat, 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 everywhere you go, flat, 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 flat. So this Math Powerland guy, he had a certain style to his comedy where he just sounded like he was trolling, just kind of ignored it. But back in the day, YouTube's algorithm just puts you down these endless loops. Mm-hmm. And so I think I ended up clicking the next video. The one that really got me was by Eric Dubay. They're just my style, like just the way he goes about it and the way he breaks down why they would lie and how deep it goes. And I was like, but what about pictures from space? So I was just mystified by all the authorities telling me that we live on a globe. That was in the early stages, but something about it, there was something about Flat Earth that was like, oh, you zoom in on a ship, they say it disappeared over the horizon, but you zoom in and it's still there. And now they've moved the globe post, as I like to call it. Now they move the globe post. They moved it even further, like, oh, no, when it disappears out of your eyesight, no, it's not disappearing over the curve. It's just disappearing, like, out of your eyesight. Just get a, telescope and zoom in. But then it's like, wait a minute, but you said Aristotle saw ships disappearing bottom up. Did he have a telescope? Or was he just using his naked eye? Mm-hmm. And how far do you have to zoom in to actually see things disappear over the curvature? And did they have optical instruments back in the ancient Greek days that were powerful enough? The whole story doesn't add up. And honestly, that's been the best evidence for Flat Earth. The absolutely piss poor trash evidence for the globe.
If there was such good evidence for a spherical Earth that we live on, then we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. Lamprey, keep going. Let's get some more questions going for the debate.
Okay, how would a compass work if the Earth was flat?
So basically, a compass is structured in such a way where you have a flat disc and you have a needle on top of a flat disc. But I'm supposed to sit here and try to prove why a flat disc compass works on a round ball. Like, I think the burden of proof is on you guys to explain to me how a flat disc compass works on a fucking ball. And I'll basically just leave it at that.
It means you actually don't know how a compass works. Because for him to raise that question to you means he's expecting you to know how a compass works. You understand that, right? It means that you don't know how a compass works and he does. And he's raising that question to you, expecting you to know how a compass works. It's for you to decipher and to tear apart the argument.
No, I'm just saying that the burden of proof is on the globe people to explain how a flat disc compass is somehow extrapolated onto a sphere when I'm saying the Earth might be flat and the compass is a flat disc. I mean, why not have a needle that's suspended on some type of three-dimensional axis that actually points down to the South Pole when you're in the North Pole? No, it's a flat fucking disc with a needle in a two-dimensional plane. Like, am I going to sit here and tell you, like, who invented the compass and what are the magnetic processes involved? No, I can't go that deep for you.
DITR8, deep inside the rabbit holes in the comments, he mentions a compass only works on a flat Earth. The magnet is in the middle. It's that simple.
Okay. I mean, I can go deep. I can go a little bit deeper on compasses. I'm not an expert on compasses. The Earth is obviously and observably flat, to quote Nathan Oakley. It feels stationary. It looks like everything is revolving around us. Okay, so the burden of proof is not on flat earthers. Just these asshole, not you, Lamprey. I mean the globe elite. These bastards, have somehow flipped the burden of proof through the educational system, through systemic mockery of anybody who questions a spinning ball. They have somehow flipped the burden of proof onto us, which is absurd. The burden of proof is on the globe to tell us why I am currently upside down, why Lamprey and IAM, who are probably, God knows how far away around the globe you guys are currently oriented probably sideways right now compared to me. Even though if we were live streaming and I could see your face via Skype right now, we both orient our laptops as if we're upright. We assume that people are all upright on a flat Earth because it's obvious. So, I mean, I looked into compasses a little bit, like 4 months ago. So, I mean, but I'm not an expert on it. I'll tell you that much. I am not an expert on it.
I don't have much. These are just questions raised by a satellite engineer.
Good.
So that's all.
One more thing to add on to that is, if the world is a sphere, and you're standing at the very bottom of it, which way does the compass point? That's a question to Lamprey.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking into a few months ago. I don't think the standard compass is designed to point to the south magnetic pole. No. It's only designed to point to the north magnetic pole, which again is ironic because guess what? There's no south pole on a fucking flat Earth model. Yeah. So where are the south pole compasses? Do those exist? They might, but as far as I know, most compasses, you have a needle pointing north. It attracts to the north magnetic pole, not to the south magnetic pole. The standard stereotype about compasses is that they always point north. They have a little needle. The red side points north. They're not made to point south, as far as I know. I mean, I could be wrong, but so again, that's just more problems for the globe, not the flat side.
Yeah. All right. What else you got there, Lamprey?
Okay. My question with the celestial navigation and the changing of the stars when you change hemispheres.
They say that when you get to the equator, you can no longer see Polaris, or it'll be right there on the horizon. So when you're at the North Pole, Polaris is straight above your head. When you're on the equator, because you're moving around a globe curve supposedly, Polaris begins to sink down to the horizon. And once you go onto the other side of the equator, to the southern half of the globe, southern hemisphere, Polaris blinks out behind the horizon. You can no longer see it. This is what they tell us. And they say this is only possible on a giant ball. And they're asserted with so much just authority to them, so much arrogant authority that it's a bit annoying after a while. But no, what if Polaris appears to descend behind the horizon because of perspective? So you look down a long hallway and there's a ceiling above your head, and the further away the ceiling gets from where you're standing, the lower it appears in your vision. And so what if Polaris is descending behind the horizon, not because you're going around the other side of a big curve, but maybe because you're traveling across a flat plane, and due to perspective, the star is descending towards the horizon, like a ceiling above your head descends towards the eye level of your sight, the further away it gets. Now, they say Polaris is so astronomically, insanely bonkers far away from us that no amount of movement across the Earth causes any change in the apparent location of Polaris. So you can think of it like parallax, for example. You're driving down a street, and you look out the window to your side, and you see all the trees on the side of the road next to you. They're whizzing by, just super fast. But imagine you have a giant mountain 30 miles in the distance, and that one takes a long time to move by. It's called parallax. The further away something is, the less it will appear to move in your sight as you move. So the globe argument is that Polaris is so far away that no amount of movement on Earth is going to change its apparent location in the sky. Oh, that's a fantastic assumption. So where's the proof that Polaris is so far away? I actually haven't looked at that specific question. What is the proof? How do they know? How do they know it's that far away? I haven't looked into it, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was just more bullshit assumptions.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, again, this is just what we're told, and we're just supposed to accept it because they're scientists and they wouldn't lie to us and they couldn't be wrong. So, yeah, it's that far away. Okay.
It's kind of like the sun, for example. They also say that the sun is so far away that the light rays come in parallel.
Yes.
They say that about Polaris as well. They say Polaris is so far away that the starlight from Polaris, all the rays come in parallel onto the Earth. They say it about the sun, and that's what they have to do. They're always pushing the heavens further and further away from us. They just love to do that. It's almost like they're trying to detach us from something special in the sky. They're always pushing it further and further and further and further and further away. And it conveniently works out for them. It's amazing how convenient it works out for them in the end, because you push Polaris so far away that no amount of movement on Earth is going to change its apparent location in the night sky. So now you can say, oh, well, as it begins to disappear behind the horizon, that must be because we live on a sphere and the sphere's getting in the way. So now you got people thinking they live on a sphere. But now you also, which in my opinion, there's so many reasons why they would lie to us about that. If there's an edge and you can't get past it, and there's a dome or some kind of invisible barrier, like you would see in a simulation or a video game, which Elon Musk says we probably live in a video game. So the notion that there might be an invisible barrier or a dome at the edge of the flat Earth is really not that crazy. It's not crazy at all. If you get to the edge and you find out there's an edge, some kind of impenetrable, invisible barrier you can't get out of, then that's like seeing God face to face. It's like seeing the creator of this simulation reality. It's like coming face to face with that. So maybe that's another reason they want to hide it. So you tell us we live on a globe. No, there's no edge or there's no more land. So everybody stays put. No one cares to go. If you don't, the only way to get off and explore is to get in a fucking rocket ship. You know, it's funny. We always think of heaven as being above our heads. It's just the way we are culturally ingrained to think where heaven is. We think it's above. We think hell is below. But on a globe, heaven is not really above your head, because up, it's so they push the heavens away. They push just detaching us further and further from the fact that we are created by some type of intelligent thing. Intelligent thing created us, and that there's more to this reality than the material stuff that meets the eye.
What you were talking about with the stars and the distances, I want to pose a question to Lamprey. Do you know what star trails are? When you take a camera and you have an open shutter and you face it directly at the sky and you film for a few hours, with what happens every single time this occurs, you take a camera, full exposure, opened exposure, allow it to film for a few hours, and what you get is what they call star trails, and it's a circular pattern.
They look like shooting stars.
No. Let me just find a quick picture of it so I can show you.
Well, let me ask you, Red Pill. If you were to find out the Earth is flat, what benefit is it to you if it is true? Like, what do you get out of that? What do you do with that knowledge now that the Earth is flat?
That's a good question. I've thought about it recently, and it makes me think why they might be faking space and space travel and the grand human adventure to explore beyond. Sometimes I wonder if that's the reason they push this, what could be this potential heliocentric spinning space ball belief system. I start to wonder sometimes if the human desire to expand and grow and go out further and explore, this insatiable desire to never just sit still and be grateful for what is as it is. I'm starting to wonder if that's what space is, man. Maybe it's just, it's like an ancient thing, like, we live on this earth. Maybe one day we'll be able to go to the stars and reach out and expand. And man, if that's a tendency in human nature to want to go out and never-ending exploration, it's going to be a really tough pill to swallow, to think that, fuck, maybe there's a boundary and we can't get out, and this is it. And I think it focuses your attention back onto yourself in a sort of, like, this is how I felt sometimes when I think about this whole flat earth thing, and I start to ask myself, man, what if this flat earth shit is true, man? What if there is an edge, and what if it was created by some type of force, some intelligent thing? And I'm like, man, it does something to me where I feel like my attention is being diverted back onto myself. I become very self-conscious, but not in like a negative, insecure way. Just like, it's just like, man,
A
like
purposeful way.
in a purposeful way, and it's just it gives a significance to this little place we live on that Carl Sagan's pale blue dot fucking absolutely fails. Because that's the thing. It's like Carl Sagan's like this famous atheist dude. He's like, yes, you are just a pale blue dot. That's what Earth is, a pale blue dot in a massive universe of infinitude with billions of other galaxies, and you don't matter. There's life everywhere else. You're just a little pale blue dot, and that's supposed to give people inspiration. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna feel good that I'm just a speck of dust that exploded out of a big bang for no reason. Like, I can't even believe that ever passed for like, you're gonna get a tear in your eye because of how beautiful Carl Sagan's bullshit is. And by the way, Carl Sagan absolutely humiliated himself post-mortem because he did a episode of his famous show Cosmos,
Yeah.
on Eratosthenes' two-well experiment from ancient Greek, and Carl Sagan is on video saying, well, he did his two wells, and based on the observation with the shadows and the two wells, the only explanation is the Earth is curved. And then fast forward 20-some years, Neil deGrasse Tyson, like a year ago, he said, oh, turns out two wells isn't enough. There's an other explanation. The Earth could also be flat if you only have two wells. You need a third well. Mm-hmm. So just another humiliating heliocentric defeat. Well, if it's true that we live in some type of flat, obviously created reality, then I think it definitely changes how you view the world, how you view yourself, how you view others. I definitely think it has a deep, deep impact.
It's funny, Lamprey, because I was actually planning on asking you that exact same question, and I think I wanted to ask a lot of people who are, let's say, skeptical about the flat condition of the world we live in, or people that believe it's a globe. People get upset. They get angry. If you look at the comments that have been passing through in our conversation, there's a lot of people that are really angry, man. And if you found out that the Earth was not a globe, it was flat, and there's no space you can travel to, there's no planets out there you can travel to, you're in an enclosed area, you can go so far and that's it. If you found out that was true, how would it affect you?
It wouldn't affect me. The reason why I never really researched the concept of flat Earth is because it doesn't affect me in my daily life. The Earth being flat is not going to affect me in my lifetime.
Lamprey, could I ask you really, really quick? You say it won't affect you. It won't make a difference. Is that because the Earth is obviously and observably flat?
Well, look, if the Earth is flat and it turns out to be flat, then everything's off the table, basically. Just throw everything out, everything that's been built. I don't really know. I don't know what would come of that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's what Owen Benjamin said in a recent live stream, because he's been wrestling with flat Earth. I don't know if you guys heard about it. But
yes.
I started listening to Owen Benjamin.
Have you heard his stuff about like his rummaging over flat Earth and whether or not it's true? Have you heard that stuff?
I did. Yeah, I did. I listened to a little bit. He's fun, man. I think he's a cool guy, and he rips on everybody. He just lets everyone have it. Seth Rogen, Jordan Peterson. He just unleashes on everybody.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Hey, you guys.
I absolutely love because Joe Rogan is just like I call Joe Rogan king of the fake woke.
Yeah, absolutely, he is. Yeah, there was. I think we might have brought this up the last time we talked, but there was a Joe Rogan video. You guys can go try and find it, of him basically saying, "I'd sell my mother, to NASA," or not. That's not the exact quote, but basically saying like, "Yeah, give me the money and I'll tell you. I'll say whatever you want me to say." That's Joe Rogan.
Shout out to Nathan Oakley. The Earth is obviously and observably flat. It's all we feel. It's all we experience. It's all we see. So I just think it's ironic when you say it won't make a difference if it turns out it's flat.
Right.
Maybe that's because it's already flat.
Yeah. You know, hey, can I go back to my question about star trails for lamprey and see what I'm talking about? Okay, guys, this is what I'm talking about. So these are star trails. Now, these types of pictures are created by having a camera and have it be overexposed over a period of hours to at night to watch the movement of the stars. Now, what happens from these trails, as you can see, are these circles. And guess what's at the center of the circle?
It looks like a black hole.
That's Polaris.
Okay.
So Polaris is at the center of the because it doesn't move. Polaris is at the center, and all the other stars and wandering stars, so-called planets, are what we see of the trails around it. Okay, this is a observable, repeatable phenomenon that anyone can go out and do as an experiment, and you will come up with the exact same photograph, regardless of the distance of parallax. If this is what we see every time we do this experiment, how do you explain the globe model if in the globe model it says that the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, we are spinning around the sun at 66,000 miles an hour, and the sun itself is spinning around this great attractor at nearly 1,000,000 miles an hour? Those speeds are incomprehensible. We can't even comprehend that kind of speed. But this is the movement that the heliocentric model is telling us to believe. If that is true, if that heliocentric model is true, why do these star trails exist? Because if we're making that kind of movement all the time, there is no way we would see these perfect concentric circles. It would be maniacal.
Okay. I don't know enough about these topics to to formulate an opinion. I'm not a physicist. I'm not an engineer. I don't have a PhD. I barely got a bachelor's and undergraduate. Okay. I didn't study. I never opened a book throughout all my years of college, and I still managed to pass with a high GPA. Thank God. I don't know how I did that, but again, maybe perhaps our education system's getting watered down. Blah blah blah. Whatever that might be, but again, education is it's authoritarian because do you know how to fly an airplane?
No.
Okay, why not? You should know how to fly an airplane. You know all this about Polaris and red pill philosophy. You know so much about flat Earth. So, if you study it, watch a couple YouTube videos on how to fly an airplane, you should be able to go out and fly an airplane. I don't know how to fly an airplane. I can watch simulations on YouTube. I can read some PDFs and get books on it. But at the end of the day, I have to put these things into practice. So, for example, with flat Earth, okay, I think the Earth is round. Yes, I do. There are 3,500 naval captains who have a gross tonnage license over 100. Therefore, there's 3,500 American citizens who can theoretically take a boat and go around the Earth. He can circumnavigate the globe on a boat, okay? Versus, let's say, moon landing, where there's only been 12 people that landed on the moon. It's a little bit harder to prove that we landed on the moon versus flat Earth. You see what I'm saying?
You can circumnavigate east to west on a flat Earth. North to south is a totally different story, and there's a lot of bizarre shit going on with north to south circumpolar navigation. I'll give you the best example. There's a YouTuber who's a flat Earth debunker. His name is Greater Sapien, and a few months ago he raised like $20,000 from his viewers to take a flight around the poles. From north to south, around the poles. As you know, the mainstream flat Earth model, there is no south pole. It's just an ice wall around the end. But on the globe, you should be able to fly north to south around the poles. Then, like a couple months after that, the Greater Sapien YouTube guy, releases a video saying, basically, I don't know where the airline company went. They disappeared. They took the $20,000 and they vanished. And that was the last I heard an update from his YouTube channel. And it was it was like humiliating, and it turned out to be a scam. They took the money. Like, that is irony you can't write in a movie. You can't even make that shit up. So in regards to circumnavigation, east to west, easy on a flat Earth. North to south, there's no South Pole. You can't do it.
The distance becomes greater as you get closer to the equator, though.
But yeah, I mean, that's not an issue, man. It's not an issue. It's not an issue. In fact, there's something called the azimuthal equidistant map projection. That's the mainstream flat Earth map. Is actually just a globe but flattened out, so that Antarctica gets stretched around the edges, and you got the North Pole in the middle. So literally, the flat Earth map is basically just the globe but squashed. So as far as I know, most of the latitudes and longitudes, they can pretty much work just as easily on a flat. There's no reason that the flat Earth can't just be greater distances at the equator, as you said. There's just no reason why it couldn't be. There's just no reason. But so I mean, you were saying just a little nugget there.
I got all right. But the thing is that, and me and Aim have discussed it, is that education and knowledge is in fact authoritarian, right? Now, obviously, we can question those who are telling us lies, climate change and amongst other things, but the issue is that sorry. Okay, again, education is authoritarian. Same thing with maybe flat Earth or the Earth being round or whatever it might be. And I think the problem with the internet is that it's become it's just throwing shit on a wall, and whoever sounds the most educated or most knowledgeable, or the one wearing a lab coat, we just gravitate to those.
And it's kind of an argument against the globe, because I mean, you're basically saying you can't really trust anybody, and the metric of truth is not whether somebody sounds persuasive or not. It's whether or not it holds up to scrutiny, whether or not it holds up to scientific method. So
I'm a much more pragmatic thinker. That's just me. I'm gonna listen to a satellite engineer versus a flat earther. I'm just sorry. That's just how it is. I'm gonna listen to a 65-year-old who makes $250,000 working for a multi-billion-dollar company.
I bet they exist. I mean, there's airline pilots. There is naval officers. There's engineers, and of course, there's many more of them who won't say anything because of the authoritarian consensus of worship that you just said you're a fan of. Throughout the history of science, you have paradigms that are taught, people think are true and infallible, and inevitably, with enough time and enough generations coming and going, a new paradigm comes in as the old realizes that it cannot stand up to the scrutiny. I'm not going to say I respect you for that kind of thinking, because it's literally the opposite of critical thinking. You're just looking up to authority figures and saying, well, if the people in power say it, then I'm going with them.
He is an authority because he's taken the time to study, to master a specific area, and for you to come in and piss on his work and what he does, I'm listening to a 65-year-old man with PhD. Now, you can laugh all you want.
What about the 2,500-year-old man called Eratosthenes that Neil deGrasse Tyson says actually got it wrong? He didn't have enough wells to prove the shape of the Earth. That is an authority figure getting thrown in the trash can by the modern day establishment because they can't even hold up their own heliocentric belief system to the scrutiny.
Someone that's been dead for 2,000 years versus someone I had lunch with 2 weeks ago.
The point is that he has been being taught as actual, undeniable, irrefutable truth that the Earth is a sphere for the last 2,000 years. It's been put into the textbooks.
The authorities who design these things. Do you understand where I don't understand where you're going with this, because I'm trying to show you that, hey, look, there's a guy who designed a cell phone. Here's a guy that designed a satellite. Here's a team of people that have made these things for us all to enjoy.
Listen, bro, it's not little old me saying that there's problems with the heliocentric model. It's Neil deGrasse Tyson conceding like crazy that they've been wrong about shit. conceding about how high you can see curvature from, conceding that Eratosthenes, the ancient Greek who did the experiment, saying that he got it wrong, even though it was taught as dogma doctrine for 2,000 years as proof of the globe. So
scientists are always wrong. They
well,
constantly.
that's my point. That's my point.
There are actually self-proclaimed flat earthers, quote unquote flat earthers, who are pilots, who are engineers. So your appeal to authority in that sense of the argument doesn't really work, Lamprey, because there are your engineers that do believe.
There was one engineer.
Speak to one. I'd love to hear someone like that.
Look this guy up. This guy's on YouTube. Balls Out Physics with Brian Mullen. He's a qualified engineer, a working engineer, credentialed, degreed, and everything. And he was making YouTube videos saying, holy shit, this isn't adding up. The earth might be fucking flat. There's like no proof we live on a spinning ball. What happened was, poor Brian Mullen deleted his YouTube channel. Mullen disappeared off the face of the internet because somebody called his boss. Mm-hmm. Someone saw he was making videos questioning the authorities, and they're like, this guy says he has an engineering background and he works in engineering, but if you think the earth is flat, then obviously you're a danger in the world of engineering. You might not be licensed. Maybe you haven't updated your license. So someone called his boss and then had a talk with him, and guess what? The boss talked to Brian and said, you got to stop doing this flat earth stuff. That's what I heard the last about Brian. Yeah, and how many people like Brian keep their fucking mouths shut because they're afraid of losing their jobs? So how many people actually really believe it? They think it's round?
Prior to the medieval times and during the medieval times, most of these people that we discuss now did it not for money. They did it because they felt that there was a wrongdoing, there was an injustice. So they went out of their way against, the authority, which would have been the church at that time. And a lot of them got killed for their beliefs, so they had to be silenced. No doubt about it.
Yeah, Dr. John Dee, he's a PhD, and he's been doing long-distance Zoom observations to see if distant buildings are hidden by the Earth's curvature. Guy has a PhD in spectrophotometry, and he releases like 2-3 hour long videos that are hyper technical, and I mean it doesn't get any more scientific and unbiased and objective than what he's doing, and he absolutely destroys the globe model. So that's one PhD. He has a fucking YouTube channel, and he had a back and forth recently with Mick West. Mick West is like, the go-to flat earth debunker guy. He's been on Joe Rogan's podcast. He was on Joe Rogan's old show called Question Everything on Sci-Fi Channel. Mick West. And Mick West loves to, quote, debunk flat earth. And Dr. John Dee had extensive back and forth emails with Mick West. And Dr. John Dee, PhD in spectrophotometry, came to the conclusion that Mick West is full of shit and he's not being completely upfront with this debate over these Zoom tests. And so there's that. So there are plenty of people who are very smart and, quote, credentialed and qualified, but a lot of them have to shut their mouths because who wants to lose their job?
There are scientists who can disprove flat Earth without actually getting paid to do it. That was more or less what he's trying to get at with the whole concept of science not being monolithic.
I wanted to show you the azimuthal equidistance map, just so you can see it, because I don't know if you've kind of looked at that as the kind of popular model that is used by flat Earth.
I say it.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, I'm sorry, I was just backtracking a bit, but Chris brought this up about the shape and the map, but that's it. So you can see the equator there. You can see the equator, you can see the Antarctica, you can see the North Pole. But that's basically the general understanding of what flat Earth looks like. Anyway, you got another question for Chris?
Let me take a look here.
Hey, shout out to Lamprey for coming in here and just, I understand you don't even look into this topic as much as I do.
No, but in all seriousness, I fish and I see the boat disappearing on the horizon. For me, that's about enough. On top of the authoritarians telling me that the Earth is round, I'm quite satisfied with knowing I'm satisfied with knowing the Earth is round, to be quite honest with you. The other thing is the polar route. AM disagrees on the polar route. When I fly to Cambodia, and I will be doing that in another month, is that they take the polar route. They go up through Canada, past Alberta, shoot over Alaska, come down the Kola Peninsula, then fly over, Japan, and I land in South Korea. And then from South Korea, I go to Cambodia.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
Well, here, let me bring up that flat Earth map again, and I'll show you exactly how that route takes place on a flat Earth. So here's New York. You're flying across Canada, over Alaska, and bang, you're here. Right there. Straight line, easy route, no problem. When I fly from Canada to Indonesia, same thing. Or LA, it's a straight route past Alaska, bang, there's Indonesia. Okay? And look, there was an article a few years back about an emergency landing from a flight from Bali to Los Angeles. And that is a flight I have taken 1,000 times. Well, not 1,000 times, many times. LA to Indonesia, either Bali or to Jakarta. And that flight is a straight line right here, past the pole, and you hit Indonesia. Now, during that flight, a woman was pregnant. And the plane had to make an emergency landing because this woman was going into labor mid-flight. Now, on a globe, you fly this way. You see the curve like this. You fly around this way. Guess where the emergency landing took place? Lamprey.
Where?
Alaska.
You landed in Alaska.
Yes.
Yeah.
On a globe, you're fucking way far away from Alaska. But on a flat map, you go right past it. So I just wanted to point that out as far as, talking about the shape of the Earth. There's your flights. Do yourself a favor, pull out this flat Earth map and then map all your flights out and see how they work geographically.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to something you said. Lamprey, what you said about ships disappearing bottom up. I want to show you something here real quick.
I've been watching your videos on that, trust me.
Did you see the one with a little boat diagram I made?
Yeah, I see that in the Skype chat.
You can
Yeah, this is what I've heard fairly recently. So I decided to mock this up here, little diagram. So yeah, the average person, even National Geographic the other day when they spoke about Aristotle seeing ships disappear bottom up, they had Aristotle standing on the shoreline. Because the ship is much bigger than the person, their eye line is below the midpoint of the ship's height, and naturally there's a smaller angle to the bottom of the ship than there is to the top of the ship. And as a result, smaller angle, meaning the ship is apparently smaller in your vision as it goes away than the top of the ship. And when things get too far away and too small, your eyes can no longer resolve them. There's not enough pixels. So naturally, the part of the ship that is apparently smaller due to angular size is going to disappear first. And that's a pretty sound explanation in my view for how things can disappear bottom up. So I just wanted to spit that out there because
angular resolution and the limit of our vision is something that people don't think about when they are talking about this subject.
There's a guy, his YouTube channel is Life is Short. He did a 3.5 hour, in fact, I'm going to nab the link up. I actually have the tab open now because I've been rewatching it a few times because it's fantastic research. But
send it in Skype and I'll share it.
Yep, about to send it. And he did a 3.5 hour presentation on how the rate at which things disappear bottom up due to the way vision and our eyes work very closely matches the rate of the Earth's alleged curvature. And so when you get to the point where the Earth's curvature matches the rate at which things disappear bottom up simply due to the way your eyes work, you're getting to a point where this is obviously a deliberate deception. This isn't just a mistake. Somebody figured this math out, God knows how long ago, and they hijacked, to use a Nathan Oakley term, they hijacked perspective. They hijacked angular size, and they wrapped it around a globe. So yeah, for me, that's like, if this turns out to be true, and to be fair, I don't fully understand this angular resolution argument, because again, it's a 3.5 hour hyper technical presentation. It's like there's so much to freaking learn. I'm not going to claim that I understand this little nugget. But if this turns out to be true, then this is like the best proof for me that makes me 100% flat Earth, because I'm not 100% flat Earth yet, but I get closer every day. Yeah, there's actually somebody in the chat. Shout out to Sleeping Warrior. Guy's a legend in this whole flat versus globe debate. And I was watching a live stream the other day, and he was talking about how I think he's in the process right now to go after the educational system in the UK, where he's from, to legally challenge whether or not the heliocentric model that they're teaching is actually grounded in facts.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I heard, they're serious. Sleeping Warrior Anthony Riley, right there in the chat, they're serious. They're going to go like challenge. There he goes. He says we are indeed going to challenge the evidence for globe in court. So they're serious. Like, they're taking this shit to court. They're going all in. And from what I heard recently, Sleeping Warrior was saying that there's even legal precedent in the UK for getting the school system, the educational system, to basically question what they're currently being taught. It had to do with global warming, I believe. Mm-hmm. I think the schools were basically saying global warming is real. If you question it, you're a racist. And so there was no alternative perspective being offered in the schools surrounding global warming. And apparently, I think the judge ruled in favor of the people who were saying, no, you have to show the other side of the global warming argument. There's actually an other side to the argument that's valid, grounded in science, and it's not just a bunch of anti-science people. There actually is a good alternative argument to the global warming thing. So, fascinating. Sleeping Warrior also says, S.406 Education Act 1996 outlaws the indoctrination of children with, quote, promotion of partisan politics. The Dimmock case of 2007 established the way the law will operate. So that's the legal precedence he was talking about, I think.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, the partisan politics in post-secondary education today, all education, is out of control. It's fucking out of control. Anyway, do you got any other questions you want to ask Chris there, Lamprey?
I mean, I got just one more, but I mean,
okay.
I don't really know if it's going to make that much of a difference at this point. I mean, I'm obviously not going to convince him, and he's not going to convince me. I think it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting concept. I have not done enough research on it to really formulate an opinion on Flat Earth. I really don't know. I don't know what to say. It's good to listen to someone with a different viewpoint. There's no doubt about it. And I like how you seem to be really passionate about it, which I think is fucking awesome. I really hope you keep running with it. I would like to see you try to maybe put it down on some paper, try to maybe cite some sources other than maybe just YouTube videos or something like that, and throw it at a professor. Write something down, tell him disprove this, disprove that, and see what the authority has to say to that, and see if he can debunk what it is you have to say and write.
I think if you want to learn stuff because you're passionate about it and you actually want to understand it, just because you want to understand it, you don't have to go to college to do it for grades and all these secondary or underlying motives that people go to college for. So,
all right.
All right. Well, what was your last point you wanted to make there, Lamprey?
Radio frequencies bouncing when they, because the Earth is apparently a sphere, is that they don't travel straight. They bounce off the surface and go off into outer space, which is why I Love Lucy is floating out there somewhere.
By the way, was that one of the ones that was written down in the comment?
Yeah, it's like a line of sight propagation, the 50 megahertz rule.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that. I think it also has something to do with. I think there's like a corollary argument about, what's it called, Doppler radars and how the Doppler works. And to be honest with you, I don't know shit about that. So,
Is you got two directions to look, down or up.
oh
And
yeah,
you want to kind of go over that, what you were saying about that?
yeah. I mean, basically, um, you have you have a bunch of so-called evidence that they throw at us. Basically, all the stuff that's in space, satellites, and pictures that satellites are taking, and the China probe lands on the moon, some absurd, ridiculous bullshit, and in fact, uh, I think you kind of said it last time. You said that we kind of we can't uh, we can't prove any of that stuff. And that's a really good point because how do you prove all that stuff? You have all this stuff that's unfalsifiable, and that's sort of ironic because it's almost like the go-to best evidence. Like the best evidence Globers go to
Hmm.
is the one thing we can't prove, we can't check, we can't validate, we can't verify. It's almost like exactly the kind of evidence you would point to if they were hiding something about it, so you can't actually verify it for yourself.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. When you had your video about the National Geographic, and by the way, that video got dropped. Your name got dropped by Jaronism because of that video. In that video, National Geographic goes, "Here's a boat. We're going to float it out. All right, they're going to do it. They're going to do some experiment that can be verified, that anybody can do. They're not throwing us a fake picture of a satellite. They're like, okay, look, we're gonna film this. We're gonna go out. We're gonna watch this boat go off into the distance, and then you're gonna see. Basically, they're gonna say you're gonna see the sail of the boat disappear slowly from the bottom up. But then there was that one point in the video where it was mentioned that they were gonna do another experiment with balloons. Was it?
Yeah, like helium type big ass helium balloons.
Right. So they had balloons on the other side of the lake, and they were gonna raise them up, and then as evidence, they'd be like, okay, you can't see them now, but as we raise them, they'll go over the curve and you'll see them, and they totally cut that out of the video.
Yeah, they cut it out. And 6 months before National Geographic released the hit piece, which they released it just a couple days ago, but like 6 months before that, because they filmed it months earlier, National Geographic, or rather Flat Earthers who were on the scene filming the whole thing, they released footage that they had captured with their own cameras, showing their Flat Earth buddies on the other side of the lake, saying they could see the balloons through the cameras they were zooming in with. And one of the globe guys on the scene was like, "Oh, there's no way he could see it because the balloons are hidden behind the curvature." So basically it's like this cognitive dissonance things where the guy simply because he's so convinced he lives on a globe and the balloons cannot possibly be hidden, he refused to accept that they were actually seeing it. But I even think there's footage from the camera zooming in showing the damn things on film. So it's just typical mainstream media hit pieces, man. That's what they do. It's nothing new. They did it with Trump 2016. The mainstream media they just lie because they know the average viewer watching television is a zombie. So they know they can just get away with anything. So it's just what they always do. Nothing surprising, and that's probably why every flat earther on the scene. Yeah, that's why every flat earther on the scene had a camera on hand just to make sure in case there were shenanigans. And look, it turns out there was plenty of shenanigans. Why would they cut out half the experiment?
Yeah.
In fact, I would say that weather balloon experiment was way more elaborate and
interesting
than some dude on a fucking raft holding a poster.
Yes.
like what the fuck are you doing? Like, I hope you had that poster secured tightly to the raft. I hope it wasn't just in his hand bouncing up and down. Like, what a joke.
Yeah. That kind of shenanigans, they're hiding shit, man. I mean, they're not being transparent with anything they do. They will offer you evidence that comes from hundreds of thousands of miles above you where nobody can go and test. Nobody can test it. Nobody can verify it. They have a monopoly on that information. And then when it comes down to the evidence on the Earth that we can all witness and verify and do our own experiments, they lie. If the ball's real, why do you got to do that? I don't understand.
Yeah, what's the benefit of them lying though? That's really my biggest argument against flat earthers is why. What purpose does it serve? I can understand a little bit with the moon, but as far as the flat Earth, I don't really get it. Can you
Simply, what if they faked the moon landing just because they were in the space race with Russia? And what more motive do you need? So they fake the moon landing, and then once you say it looks like a globe, you can't, 10 years later when you actually do go to the moon, and it turns out it's not a globe like you said it was, the government's not going to be like, oops, it turns out it's flat, and we lied about the first moon landing. So they can never tell us the truth if they lied the first time. So if you think there's good enough of a motive to lie just because they're in the space race with Russia, then that means everything NASA does thereafter has to corroborate with the original fakery. Anything that's too different in terms of how the moon looks or how the Earth looks, anything that's too different literally will expose them. It'll expose the original one as a fraud. That's the down-to-earth one. I'm starting to think lately that the reason they're lying about this is because this is a satanic evil system we live in. It's a satanic evil system. It turns out most of the die-hard defenders of the globe are hardcore atheists. Atheists love Satan. The spinning space ball is the ultimate wet dream for a godless atheist Satanist. Lump it in with evolution. So yeah, it's just like you got the evolution, then you throw that one in with the heliocentric model. And then when you start talking about, like I was saying earlier, that 3.5 hour long presentation that this YouTuber did, going into the details about how the rate at which things disappear bottom up due to the way your eyes work very closely matches the rate at which things disappear over the so-called radius of our Earth. It's too smart. So sometimes I wonder if there's greater spiritual forces at work here, it's just it. So yeah, I think there's something way deeper going on here, and why would they lie? I think it's it might be a combination of the two options I just gave. So yeah,
the reason they're lying is because they're trying to hide the Creator from you. They have an agenda, and that's why they're doing it. They've made a commitment a long time ago to hide the Creator from you.
That portrait of Satan, Baphomet, apparently that's a tranny. So maybe the tranny agenda is coming from the Satan agenda, and the Satan agenda is also responsible for the heliocentric agenda. So maybe it all goes hand in hand or something. Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think that's a really good potential explanation.
Yeah, great having you on again, man. It was good.
Yeah, Lamprey, appreciate it. Thank you again. I am obsessed with this topic, and I know that it's not really your thing, so the willingness to talk about it is great.
God bless you, man. Go with it. I really hope you do something with it, 100%, all the way.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you again, Chris, for coming on. All right. Anyway, have a good night, guys. Thank you for coming on, and we will see you the next show.